All right, good. I guess it's afternoon now, John. We just head over to the 12 o'clock mark, and hello everybody else that's joining from all around the world.
Good afternoon, and well, maybe good morning and good evening then, just depending upon where people are coming from, right, Pete? Even if you're Central Time, it's still good morning. That's not that far off from us.
That's why we have to keep John around. He keeps me on my toes for sure, and always thinking outside the box about all the perspectives. So much so, as we were kind of in the pre-show notes, we're talking about our March Madness bracket. So anybody that's here would love to hear. Did you fill one out? Did you do men's and women's like John's family did? Here's my bracket over here, John. Who do you have winning yours?
I have a UConn Tennessee final in the men's, and I'm going repeat for UConn.
Okay.
And on the women's, Caitlin Clark and the South Carolina Gamecocks in a epic final that I have South Carolina remaining undefeated.
Wow.
And I'm not afraid to admit this. This is the first time that I know multiple more women's college basketball players than I do men's college basketball players. And I think Caitlin Clark is a world-class innovator. I hope she has an incredibly successful NCAA tournament. At the same time, I hope that she breaks all those barriers and she gets to compete against Steph Curry in the NBA three-point contest coming soon. That's a change they should make very soon.
I think it's pretty remarkable what she's done for the game. And we'll get into the book things in a little bit, but I wonder how much the NIL has done to this, opening up where people can actually benefit from some of the branding pieces there. So the game will continue to change, and I will have to go fill out my NCAAW bracket here soon. So, John, we are here to talk about a couple of things, right? The book process, kind of what we learned throughout that journey, and then also kind of what's in the book. So I'd ask you the question first of, what point was it that you're like, I got to write this book, right?
Well, thanks for asking, Pete. It's a very, very personal time in my life when that came to be. And I actually thought about writing a book for a number of years for much of my adult career. But I frankly wasn't a reader, and other than a couple paragraph emails, I wasn't much of a writer. And then my parents passed away in 2019 and 2020. Yeah. And you kind of have that moment where you realize that you lost two really important people in your lives. And what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And there were a couple things on that list that I wanted to make sure that I got accomplished that I hadn't done yet. And writing a book was one of them. And I made that goal very public. I decided to do it, made the goal very public. And then I got support, not only from my internal marketing director, Bridget Klein, shout out to her.
Yeah, love Bridget.
Yes, love Bridget. And then I hired a writing coach to help hold me accountable. Excuse me. And then I just was real diligent about it. I read Atomic Habits, and I paired a habit of Saturday mornings and Sunday mornings to myself doing my own thing to writing. And lo and behold, 1 year later, 70-some thousand words came out of my brain onto a piece of paper. No chat GPT, no AI tool, just my brain to Word document. And then from there, was lucky to sign with Sherm Books. And after we figured out all the contracting and timing, launched the book at the tail end of 2023. It was a surreal experience, to say the least.
Yeah, well, I'm going to give you a high five. Congratulations. It is a heck of a process. And so you were at a computer, right? MS Word. You weren't like a write it down and then type it up afterwards kind of person.
I did a little bit of that, but I found that to be terribly inefficient because I had to read my own writing, which was that was hard to say in my scribble. But most of it was sitting in my sofa couch in my family room, hot tea or water next to me, window open. And it was mostly in the wintertime I was doing this. So I was looking for something to do. As you and I both know, we're avid golfers, and Saturday mornings are meant for golf in the summer, and in the winter I needed something to do. And that's where I had the motivation as I looked out at the snow and said, get this thing done before the snow melts and I can go out and golf on the weekends.
So let me just make a little disclaimer and a clarification there. John is a fantastic golfer, almost to the professional. I mean, you could argue, right? Professional golfer. I think that's what we had on the cover. Nearly professional golfer. I enjoy golfing, so just as a piece there. So you went with a publisher, and Sherm obviously very prominent. A lot of people that are listening, watching this later, were like, "Oh yeah, got it." My approach was a little bit different, right? So whenever I didn't plan on writing this book until enough people said, "Hey, we need more than just your workshops and presentations, right? We want more than what you've provided to us in this, hour. Sometimes it'll go up to 3 hours." And it was my team, actually, John, that said, "Hey, Pete, all the different methodology, the curriculum, you've seen some of it in a couple of different settings through PHRA, right? Shout out to Liz Lamping. Shout out to the Disrupt HR folks as well for those opportunities to share some of the message. But it was really from the need from the folks around. So I jokingly or facetiously said, "Well, I'll just write a book on this topic." And then the team's like, "No, you actually, you're going to do this part." And so you went with the publishing house. I went with the self-publishing piece, but similarly where you worked with a couple of other folks. And I think the biggest difference of self-published versus, going with a publishing house is flexibility and stability, right? And then also the flexibility and the kind of timeline, right? Some of the structure, more work on yourself. And that was the piece where I wanted to get it out there a little bit sooner. So I said, you know what, we'll go with this self-published piece. Now it gets into the marketing part of it, but yeah, it is a long process for sure, arduous to say the least.
Pete, it's interesting you say that because I was recently invited to a local authors event at the Barnes and Nobles in Fairlawn, Ohio. That was just this last weekend, and there were 15 authors there, and they all were set up in it's a big Barnes and Nobles, and we were dispersed throughout different parts of that particular store, and we had a chance to sell our book and talk to the customers and share it. It was kind of cool. Not a lot of HR fans that came by to see me that were just generally looking for other books, which I thought that was pretty fun to have those discussions. But we got together, the 15 authors, for a roundtable discussion. There were a handful, 5 to 10 people that were asking questions. Of the 15 people that were there, only 2 of them had traditional publishers. I was one of them, and only one of them she signed in advance with not McGraw-Hill, HarperCollins. Sorry,
yeah, HarperCollins merged.
And it was pretty cool to hear her story. The main complaint that everyone shared, and especially those with the person that wrote the book through HarperCollins, is the lack of publishers' support to marketing the book.
Yeah.
And if you're thinking of yourself creating a book and putting content together and developing a manuscript, and whether you do self-publishing like Pete or hybrid publishing, which is a combination of self-publishing and using a print house, or a traditional publisher like we were able or fortunate to get with Sherm, you have to make sure you develop your own marketing strategy around getting the word out, having friends, family, colleagues supporting you with the book. I've been given a lot of support and praise in that regard as it relates to the launch of our book, and using the community to amplify and to grow our community beyond just the people that were kind enough to support me. So you may have seen out on the internet, on LinkedIn and Facebook, people holding up their HR Like a Boss copy of the book with a big smile and a comment about it. That was all very intentional on our part to try to spread the word on HR Like a Boss.
We did something similar, and I'll put the links in the chat here in just a moment, where people are taking a selfie of their copy of Pathfinders. And that's, I think, one of the biggest parts, right? Hey, get the book out there, do the review, is it a picture? Is it just some words? Is it the selfie video, right? Those couple of different ways. Because what I found as well, John, is not everybody wants to support and give love in the same way, right? So meet them where they are has been pretty helpful. I'd ask you the question: what's been the toughest part, right? What was like the trickiest part of the book writing journey for you?
Contrary to what you described, Pete, when you did your self-publishing, you didn't want to wait around, and you had your book. Your team encouraged you to do it. You wrote your manuscript. You went through your process, and then bang, you self-published. And I don't know what the beginning and end of that time frame from start to finish was for you. I'd be curious, and I'm sure so would our listeners. But it was
June 23rd to November 20th
in the same year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's just say roughly March 2020 to October 24th, 2023. The patience in between writing the manuscript took me about a year's time.
Mm-hmm.
And then from that year, roughly, let's say, well, I should say that I took my manuscript on vacation in July of 2021. Took me roughly 15 months to write the manuscript from idea to manuscript completion because I was doing it very part-time.
Mm-hmm.
And then from July of 2021 to October of 2023, that 27 months of waiting, that was by far the hardest part. And I really did that because we wanted to partner with Sherm. Sherm had some other projects and priorities. Then we looked at different launch dates, and the launch dates were moving for a variety of reasons. Just working through that process and being patient, I would say to you, is probably the biggest differentiator of self-publishing, where you put yourself in almost complete control.
Yep.
When you work with a traditional publisher, of where you have to work within the confines of their contracting, of their other schedule, of the people that are involved in it. It all worked out fabulously well, and I'm super glad to have partnered with Sherm. It's been a great amplification for my brand and getting the book out there. And I call it the Good Housekeeping seal of approval for those that don't know who Sherm is. But being an entrepreneur and being generally impatient, those 27 months were really hard for me to patiently wait and get the book out through the process that we actually ended up doing it.
I think the trickiest part for me was just the unknown, right? So I don't know what I don't know. And talking with people like you, other folks that have published books, one of the biggest pieces of feedback that I got, there were 100 people that reviewed the work in progress manuscript as it was coming together, the outline at various stages of maturity. And they said, Pete, we want to see more personal stories, right? People that publish their own books. Casey was one of them. He's like, hey, if I was to do this again, I'd put in more of those personal stories. So if you actually, as you go through the book, John, you'll see that there's a little tractor in there. Pete's perspective, right? Having grown up on the farm, it's kind of like, hey, how can we, share some more of these relatable pieces? And that's been some really good feedback to me, is when people read the book, they're like, hey, I really like those. I can sort of feel like I was there in that situation. And I think this was where we can migrate a little bit towards some of the strategic and some of the tactical. So if you want to give us a little bit of kind of HR like a boss, as we delve into that, and I'll put the link up here in a second, how are we thinking about that from a strategic perspective? And then we'll migrate into some of the Pathfinders of like what to actually do and those steps to take. So back over to you, John.
Sure. Yeah, no, thanks, Pete. Foundationally, at the cornerstone of the book, it's being a business leader that just so happens to practice in the field of HR. It is a book that people outside of HR can read to become better managers, become better business leaders. Foundationally, Pete, if you look at any issue inside of your business, or if you look at any real issue you maybe have in your life, my guess is there's a person that's involved in that, whether it's yourself or a bad manager or a toxic colleague, or let's just say on the flip side, if there's great success that's happening and going on within your life or business, my guess is there's a person that's at the center of that. And doing HR like a boss is all about connecting the people to the purpose of a business and getting at the root cause issues that exist within your organization and addressing those and amplifying the opportunities, leveraging the great things inside of your company. And in order to do that, I believe at the foundation, we call them the table stakes in the book. You must love what you do, and you must take an immense amount of ownership. To me, HR Like a Boss is not written for CHROs. It's really written for anyone that wants to take ownership of their job and loves what they do. And it can be read by a intern or a college grad, which frankly is is something that's happening these days. I've been told a lot of college students grabbing the book and figuring out, okay, how do I do this HR thing a little bit differently?
Yep.
And then we created 5 sections of the book, which are really the foundation of how I organize the thought. And it's pretty cool because what's in the book is what I presented at NORC and at PHRA and at the Kent State alum presentation that I did 2018, 2019. And it's thinking differently, it's being different, it's being better, it's taking action, it's making an impact. Those are the handful of things that I think, and in each one of those sections, I make anecdotal recommendations. The money chapter of the book is chapter 14, which is treating your job or department like a business.
Yeah.
And probably was, if again, Pete, I don't know if your experience, if you had an aha moment while you're reading back your own manuscript, that was probably the most awkward part for me. And I would agree with you what you shared. The parts that felt where I was getting very personal with the content is what I actually thought was probably some of my best content.
Yeah.
And if I were to write another book, I'd create more personal, anecdotal stories, opinions, perspectives, versus trying to interpret what other people thought of a particular topic.
Yeah. And I agree. I want to plus one that so much. And I think that's what makes it unique, right? Is that part of, hey, here's my experiences, insights, perspectives, stories, right? That's what makes it really, you can build on the other concepts, right? But you also have your own ones, right? The Bruce Lee quote that I love, and you've probably heard me say this 15 times before: absorb what is useful, discard what is not, add what is uniquely your own. And that's what makes you and me and some of these content creators so special.
Yeah, I agree. Well, inside of that, just to continue real quick, and thanks for that input, because it's important that if people are listening to this, maybe one person that'll resonate with them when they write their book, they'll become a bestseller just like you, Pete, because they told their own story and really amplified that. But the money chapter, chapter 14, is about building the HR Like a Boss business plan and implementing that within your own function, your department, within your organization. And having written that and read it back a number of times, I share it in presentations. What I was told was HR professionals are looking for inspiration, they're looking for support, and they also like the how-to. Tell me how to do this thing, HR Like a Boss. And in that business plan, we talk about first and foremost having a purposeful commitment. That was my aha moment when I read the book back. Most employers, in my opinion, especially for-profit employers, lack a clearly defined purpose of the organization, its aspirational why. And sometimes they confuse it with a mission. Those are terribly different than a purpose. What's the bigger, greater good we're trying to do with an organization? If you're curious as a company that does that well, check out Bomba Socks. They have been very intentional about their purpose and make it very clear they have that one-to-one relationship. Then besides that is being people-centric, which is terribly important if you're in HR. And I make that simple claim of look your CEO in the eye and determine whether they believe that their people are their most important asset, and they'll put them first before everything else. And I mean everything else: profit, shareholders themselves. Next is the ability to produce on a consistent basis. How we describe doing that, simply put, is does every employee understand what makes a successful day today? And can that determination of success be quantified and measured and celebrated, or held accountable if they're missing the mark on a consistent basis? Next is about process continuity. If you want to have discipline, you must develop processes and have consistency if you want to scale a business.
Yep.
If Pete's new to Willery and he's in sales and we want to teach him how to sell effectively at Willery, we have to have a structure and a process to that, versus, off the top of my head, this is what I think you should do. And then Pete goes and does it his own way. There's got to be some process and structure to that. And then the last point is profitable characteristics. This is probably the most controversial thing I talk about in the book, and one that I think is paramountly important, thanks to my friend Matt Soulful and his inspiration of making sure that if you own any business, publicly traded, nonprofit, or private, every one of your employees should understand the financial outcomes of that company. They should know where the business is from a P&L standpoint. They should know where you are from your balance sheet, because I don't want to say I got into an argument once, but I had a very contentious conversation with someone at a presentation I did that said that is not everyone's. That information should not be available to every employee because it's a privately held company. And my counterpoint back was, is everyone that gets that information, your shareholders, I understand they've invested money and that's very important, but are they spending 2,000 hours of their life every single year devoting their time to that company? And shouldn't they know how well or not well your business is doing? And ultimately, what I also thought out of that subject was, if you work at a for-profit company, my guess is the majority of people these days are investors. Robinhood and all the cool apps have made buying fractional shares of a business very, very easy. Why don't we allow them to learn what the importance of reading a profit and loss, how you generate revenue, how you drive down cost of goods sold, how you manage your indirect expenses, so that then you can become a better employee, a better investor. And there's no other better platform and more applicable than the company you work for, and giving them access. So basically having knowledge of the profitable characteristics of your company. Those 5 pillars of the HR Like a Boss business plan to me are the money chapter, are the things of how do you actually do HR Like a Boss. That's the formula.
So one quick question on the P&L piece. Are you saying just carte blanche, just share it out there, they get to see everything? Or is it you share certain details about the financials from the organization?
I think ultimately you get to sharing with them the majority of those details. I think as a starting point, just start with those 5 main pillars of a P&L: revenue, COGS, indirect gross profit, gross margin, however you want to look at it, indirect expenses, and then net income. Start with those high level numbers. The devil, as we all know, as business owners and leaders and shareholders, is in the details.
Yep.
And the more that you get people privy and knowledgeable to that, I will just share my own personal story to that. We mentioned that earlier. For the first 5 or 6 years of my business, I kept those financials very private. And there were years where we made a lot of money, and there were years that I lost a significant amount of money. And I wanted to shelter my employees from that roller coaster ride of the entrepreneur rides. And then I got some really sound advice from my friend Matt Soulful, and I inched my way of sharing that information to my leadership team and then to our overall firm. And I think from my perspective, I'm not all the way there yet, but we're way further ahead. And the one thing that it has done that has changed my life is that I have team members that are looking at Willery as owners of the business and caring about how we're spending money. And they want to see this thing be successful because they like working here, and they want to bring in more like-minded people to work at our firm to amplify it. And that part's been incredibly gratifying and a major lesson learned in my professional career.
Yeah, I mean, it's been remarkable to see kind of the journey as things continue to grow, develop, flourish, and I'm pumped. I think we're just a couple weeks away from the trip over to Ohio to see some more of the Willery team in person. So if you're not yet following John on LinkedIn, please do. He's good at sharing some of the upcoming events. And what I'd sort of say is one of the pieces John talked about in here is the people and the connection. And that's sort of where we make that transition from the HR Like a Boss to Pathfinders and, engineering background. So I love to have some process, some structure, make it super simple. And the way I was taught is to say, hey, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you, then I'm going to tell you, then I'm going to tell you what I told you. So Pathfinders really focusing on career maps and personal board of advisors. So whenever we talk about, hey, I'm in an organization, how are we going to help people visualize where they can go with their career journeys? One of the biggest reasons that people are leaving organizations is no map to professional growth. So I said, the heck with that. We're going to make it possible so that everybody knows how to fish, right? That's the career map. And that's in chapter 5 of the book. So you talk about the money chapter. And whenever I get more feedback from people, it seems like, oh my gosh, I get it, where I can visualize kind of where I've been, but also forecasting where I want to go. And some of our technology that we're getting ready to roll out actually enables the user to do that. So I'm excited to share that with you in the next couple of weeks, John. But that's really the piece of kind of showing, hey, because you think about whenever you go on a journey or a trip or a vacation, you usually look at something of a map or a GPS, right? Or see what other people have done, and you plan a little bit, right? I want to go here, I want to go there, I want to go there, this experience, that experience. But why aren't we doing that with our professional journeys? That thing that we spend what is it, like almost 80,000 hours on, if we do 40 times 2,000, right? There is a lot of time and effort and sweat and tears, and hopefully not blood, but you know what I mean, that goes into it. And then the second concept in there is the who are those couple of different people that we can engage with and interact with and grow along the way. So the personal board of advisors, bringing diversity of thought and insight and perspective along the way. So career maps and personal board. And I broke it up kind of part one, part two, part three, where part one is kind of the background information and the stuff to be cognizant of, the laying the foundation for, kind of who, what, when, where, why, how. And part two is where we go through the 10 different seats on your personal board of advisors. So we have a couple of different, worksheets that we'll go through. And this is what fed into the need for the book is, hey, not just one mentor, maybe not just two mentors, but how do we do that? And then phase three, part three of the book is where we can actually maintain and sustain, some of those relationships. Because again, it's like going to the gym or working on your golf swing, for example, right? If I only go out there and maybe you're actually at the point where you're able to do this, but I'm going to only swing club, 2 days out of the year. Whenever we go to actually play, I might not be as great as I want to be here. I'll put the link to Pathfinders up below the screen here so people can see it. It's where you're able to go learn a little bit more about the book and check it out. But John, have you talked with people about the career maps and the concept of personal board of advisors before?
Yeah, for sure. No, and definitely really love your inspiration around that, Pete. Frankly, the personal board of advisors, first time I ever heard that was out of your mouth. And I really thought it was a really cool concept. And I know something you were passionate about pre-writing the book. So thank you for conceptualizing that for me and making it simple to understand the importance of it. Two things I'll share real quick on the content that you're created and the work that you've done with your book. Congratulations. Major point, and appreciate it. Two things. Number one is, you quit a job because you hate your manager, is the primary reason I heard for years. And then recently they talked about lack of opportunity was a driving reason why you left. For all of us that are out there that are listening, either in a manager role or you're trying to develop a career path, is let's build that relationship with your manager to help them help you in creating opportunities. And if you work for a manager who's so selfish that you're a good employee, I don't want to create more opportunities for you because I'm going to lose you, then maybe let's reframe that conversation and try to encourage them to be looking at that in a different way. That's first and foremost. Secondarily, Pete, I've been fortunate to speak at a number of, and I know we did the same speaking gig at a couple of these groups that are in career transition, the ones that have maybe had that unfortunate blow to the stomach, or as has been told by a famous boxer, you have a plan until you get punched in the face.
Yep.
And losing your job is the proverbial punch in the face in your career. And it's a very unique circumstance and situation to be out of work and to lose your job. And I ask people that are in that, do you have a career plan? Do you have a path forward with your career? And unfortunately, most of them say no. And when you get punched in the face and you lose your path, your job you all of a sudden are trying to scramble to figure that out. And like you said, we spend 80,000 hours of our lives working. It would only make logical sense to me to have a vision board, or as you said, a career path as to where I'm going to start and where do I want to end up, because you're going to spend a bunch of time doing it. You might as well enjoy it. You might as well have a surgical plan. Unfortunately, to your point, Pete, and probably why you're getting so much praise for your book, most people don't do it.
Right.
And I know your book clearly defines how to do that, makes it simple for people to put that plan together.
And there's another, well, thank you for that. There's another piece to it of once you put it on paper, then it becomes a little bit more real and you're sort of visualizing. So some people might have, vision boards where they'll cut out from, I guess you don't really do this a whole lot anymore, but get magazines in the mail. Remember those days? And, cut things out and paste them on, a little piece of a poster board. It's a similar kind of concept, right? Then it's there. We're able to go back, we take a look at it. And the piece of, actually mapping this out and having a couple of like, well, if I want to get into being a CHRO, before that, I got to do this and this and this. And well, I'm kind of at a fork in the road. I could go and be an individual contributor and go up the chain, or I could go into leadership and go up the chain. So it's those sort of things where we don't have to have all the answers at the beginning. And that's where those couple of different advisors along the way can help us say, hey, because how much easier is it, John, if I come to you and say, well, here's kind of what I want to do, and this is what I'm thinking about and why. You're able to provide feedback because I've taken that initiative and I've put the first bit of visualization together instead of just saying, hey, I want to, get to here. And you don't really know anything else. You can't really look at it or, provide any valuable, insight. So, hey, John, we're at the 30 minutes mark, so we'll go ahead and be respectful of everybody's time. Tell us where people can find you, some of the upcoming events and dates that are going on, and we'll wrap this thing up.
Hey, Pete, thanks so much. What a great host. Love the platform. Appreciate the chance to share. My email address is right within you can see it right on the screen, john@willery.com, probably easiest way to reach me. You can also find more about Willery at willery.com or HR Like a Boss, hrlikeaboss.com as well. If you are interested, we are doing a private event on the east side of Cleveland with Pete on April the 4th, 4/4 at 4. So please reach out to me or our marketing team. I'm looking forward to having that discussion and breaking bread and having a drink or two with those that attend. And we'll be talking about just how we're pulling all this together to help advance your professional career. At the same time, in that professional development, how can you become a better human being, better person, and deliver that support to your employees, to yourself, to your colleagues, to your business, to your community. And then also on May the 4th, may the 4th be with you.
Yeah.
I'm doing a book signing at a really cool Eastside Cleveland, Loganberry Books. And then I'll be getting some of the supporters and friends of mine together to go celebrate what the book has meant to me and so many other people, which is really cool. And then the last thing I'll share, if anybody's listening, I will be at SHRM Talent in Vegas on April 17th, talking about AI's impact in the business of HR. And then in June, tail end of June, I'll be at the SHRM conference in Chicago, pitching HR Like a Boss, both in the expo hall. And I do have a session on Monday, right after Ted Lasso speaks on Sunday. I'll be talking about HR Like a Boss. And if you're there, make sure you stop by our booth because we are giving away a world-class prize. Make sure you stop by the HR Like a Boss booth at the SHRM Expo Hall.
Nice. Well, hey, safe travels, all of those places. I will see you on 4/4 at 4 and everybody else that's joining in there. We are coordinating a couple of our book launch events and book signings in the greater Pittsburgh area, and we'll even go down to the DC area soon for those. So stay tuned. Most of you have my LinkedIn information. Please feel free to reach out. Grab a copy of HR Like a Boss. Grab a copy of Pathfinders. Please share how these stories, these concepts, these ideas have impacted you and how we can make both of them better. Because John and I are open and ready for your feedback, thoughts, insights. We don't have all the answers. And there could be a second edition, right, for both these guys. So thank you, everybody, for your time. Thank you, John. Thanks to the Willery team, the Latitude team for bringing us together, and all of those that tuned in and will watch this recording afterwards. Have a great day.
See you later. Thanks, Pete. Nice job.